Extruding shape layers inside After Effects is all about our work inside Adobe Illustrator and how well the layers are organized before we import them into After Effects. In this case, in looking inside the Layers panel, every single path is on its own layer and not inside a group or a sublayer. Each layer has been named and I have separated the fill paths from the stroke paths, which will help me with the extrusion process inside After Effects. In addition, I am including this Illustrator file inside the exercise folder, which you can download below the video description in the event you want to follow along. Now inside After Effects, I will go ahead and import the Motif Illustrator document. I'm inside the project panel. I'm just going to right-click, import file. Here's the Illustrator document inside my folder. But what is important is to import this not as footage, but rather than as composition, retain layer sizes, and then click to import. What that means is that After Effects recognizes the top level layers. We set it up inside Adobe Illustrator as After Effects layers. So let's go ahead and double click on this composition. And here are all these paths that are imported from Adobe Illustrator. And as you can see, all the naming was kept, which is great. But what we need to do now is we need to convert those paths into shape layers, something that After Effects will recognize and be able to animate them. So I will shift select all of these under the layer menu, going to use create and create shapes from vector layer. After Effects does the conversion, and what I need to do is now I need to clean up my work here, basically remove all of these paths, and at the same time, every time there's something that says outlines, I'm just going to rename this to be able to clean all the work and keep things organized. So I cleaned up all these layers and renamed them. So what's next? I will go ahead inside the project panel. I'm just going to right click and bring up, just import a JPEG file here, which I'm going to click and drag this and bring this at the very bottom of the timeline. Basically, this will serve as a flat surface where all the lights will hit and bounce back, affecting all these 3D shape layers. And let me go ahead and lock this layer temporarily. So talking about 3D layers, let's go ahead and shift select all of these shapes here. And then we're going to convert this from 2D layers to 3D layers. So I'm just going to click once and all of these, since all of these are selected, they will be converted into 3D layers. All right, now for this to work and be able to extrude those, we need to switch the 3D renderer. Right now we are inside the classic 3D. Just going to click on the drop down and choose the Cinema 4D renderer. The Cinema 4D composition renderer basically is the tool for the extrusion of text and shapes. Let's also look inside the renderer options. For the quality, I'm using the draft mode because that would take less time to draw the 3D layers. But at the very end of the project, I will drag this slider all the way to the extreme to have a very clean final render. So I'm going to cancel this out. I'm very okay with that. And what we need to do next basically is we need to select each of these paths one by one, go inside that, and then inside the geometry options, we're going to change the extrusion depth. And I'm going to set this for all of them for now, to 40. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and spend some time and do this for the rest of these paths. So after spending a bit of a time, I've set for all of these shape layers, I've set the extrusion depth to 40. So I'm going to shift select, then I'm going to press the letter U twice on the keyboard to only show the modified properties. Here we go. The extrusion level is set to 40, 40, 40, and so on. So the question is, why can't we see anything changing? And the reason is that when we extrude down. It extrudes into Z space. Right now, the reason we cannot see anything is because everything sits at 0. So the extrusion has gone through the background, sticking out the other side. So first of all, let's go ahead and instead of one view, I'm going to switch to 2 views. And for this view right here, I personally recommend you to use, instead of active camera, is to use the left view. This is one thing. For this JPEG here, let me also make sure that this is also converted to a 3D layer. There you go. Now we can see that, as you can see, all the extrusion has gone through the background, sticking out on the other side. Another thing is I'm going to change the resolution preview here from full to half. That will be easier on the system. And then I will shift select all of these. And let me zoom in here a bit. I'm just going to bring those out. And I'm going to bring them right here so they sit right on top of this background. All right, this flat surface. So if I was to change this from left view to, let's say, to the custom view 1, this is what I get. We already can see the changes taking place. So having 2 composition views side by side, either the left view or the right view, will help you understand the position of the shape layers and be able to move them into Z space so you can see the extrusion. So things are looking great inside our composition. We extruded all of these shape layers. Let's go ahead and continue and add a couple of spotlights into our scene. So I'm just going to select this path 1, go under the layer menu, new light. In this case, spotlight number 1. For light type, go ahead and choose spot. And we've got the color of the light, the intensity, how intense is this. We have the cone angle. The cone angle is the angle of the cone surrounding the source of light, which determines the width of the beam at a distance. And we're going to see this very soon after. Cone feather is set to 50%. That's okay. That's fine. But what is important is to have the cast shadows on. That specifies whether the light source causes a layer to cast a shadow. And we need that. So I'm going to click on OK on that. Let me go ahead and use a 1 view here because I need a real estate here. So I want this spotlight to come from this top right corner. So I'm going to bring this up on the y-axis, on the x, and then take this point of interest and point it right on top of these shape layers, and then just push this on the z and perhaps on the y. Now let's look at this cone angle here. If I double click again, here's the cone angle. See the degrees, so you can play around with that depending your liking. I'm just going to bring this down a bit as well. So far so good. Again, none of this is final, but it's a good beginning. Let's go ahead and add another spotlight. So back on the layer menu, new light, that's second spotlight. I will leave everything as is. Make sure the cast shadow is on and click OK. Here's a second spotlight. In this case, I want the spotlight to beam from the bottom left here. So I'm going to move this on the X, on the Y, take the point of interest and point it right here. And I can bring this out on the Z. And again, I can go back to the light settings here and then perhaps change the angle and so on. All right. So again, as I mentioned, this is not final. It's a good beginning. But what we need to do now is we need to make sure that all of these shape layers accept the light sources. And right now they're not. So what we need to do is shift select all of these paths here. And then I'm going to open them up. And inside the material options, I'm going to turn the cast shadows on. Once I do that, you will be able to see a huge difference. Now, all of these layer paths accept the 2 spotlights. And now we have a nice shadow fall off. The main reason that I've separated these stroke paths from the rest of the paths coming from Adobe Illustrator is because I want these stroke shape layers to have a higher extrusion depth. In this case, I will shift select these Then I'm going to press the letter U twice on the keyboard to be able to see only the modified properties. Since all of these have been selected, I will change for all of these the extrusion depth from 40. I'm going to up this to 50. I'm going to press the letter U again once, and again we're not able to see the change, and that's because the extrusion is taking place onto the Z space. It extrudes down. So let's go back to have, instead of a one view, two views. I am on this view here. I am inside the custom view one. Go ahead and switch to the left view, and here it is. This is what I'm referring to. It went into the Z space. So I will shift select these, zoom in a bit, and then I'm just going to click and drag this on the Z axis. There we go. All right. So here's the difference now. Let's go ahead and change from the left view to the custom view one and change the preview to full view. See that? Now we'll be able to see a better view on these extruded shape layer path strokes. And that's the reason that I pre-planned this inside Adobe Illustrator for this specific reason. All right, so things are looking fantastic inside our composition. The next thing I want to go back and return is the spotlights. But as you can see, there's a lot of illumination coming from both of these spotlights. So in this case, let's go ahead and switch back to one view. So I'm going to go inside the spotlight one, and under the light options, I will change the color of the spotlight to kind of an orangey color. Click OK. Now you're going to see a nice transition coming from the top here. I will do the same on the spotlight too. Under the light options, I will change the color instead of white. Usually lights are never like completely white. So I'm going to use like an off-white, like an off-yellowish color. I'm going to click OK. You're going to see a nice transition. Again, a nice fall off. Great. Now, the next I want to talk about is the shadow diffusion. This one right here. And that refers to how soft is the shadow. Here's the one shadow for the spotlight one. And here's the other shadow for the spotlight two. So what I can do here for the shadow diffusion for this spotlight one, again, the light comes from the top right. Here's the shadow. I can improve this to, let's say, perhaps 30. It's going to be less of a shadow here. So for this one, it's going to be more soft. Let's also increase the softness for this light right here. See that? Now, if I was to move this away on the Z, actually on this light right here, that will affect the diffusion again. You see that? So it's all about where you're positioning the lights and so on. So there's no set rule rather than whatever goes to your liking. So maybe I can bring this to, let's say this one to 20. There we go. I like that. So I'm going to leave this as is, but there's one thing I would like to do is and have a bit of an extra reflectivity on all of these shape layers here. And I'm talking about the specularity. And that is, again, the reflection of all of these shape layers. So I'm going to shift select all of these and then press the letter U twice and then open up the material options. Here's the specular intensity. This is set to 50%. I'm going to set this to 70% for all of these. And I can already see the change already. So let me go ahead and zoom in a bit. And I'm going to undo this, Control-0, Command-Z. Here's before. And then here is after. A welcome change, at least on my end. All right, everything looks fantastic inside our composition. Let's go ahead and create our animation. In this case, I will go up to the layer menu and create a new 3D camera. For the type, I'm going to use a 2-node camera. And for the presets, well, you have a lot of different presets here. In this case, I'm going to go for the 24mm wide angle lens preset and then click OK. All right, so this is one thing. Another thing I'm going to do is go to the layer menu and create a new null object. Now, a null object basically, as you can see here, is an invisible layer that has all the properties of a visible layer, but it can be parented to any layer in the composition. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to parent the camera to the null object because it's just easier to control the camera through a null object. And since I'm going to have one null object, I'm going to press Enter Return on the keyboard, rename this to null, and the camera, press Enter Return, and rename this to just camera. And I'm going to parent camera to null, and I'm going to do this by using the parent pick whip. In this case, I'm just going to click and drag the parent pick whip right on top of the null object, and now the camera has been parented to the null. Great. Now, this null object, right now it's a 2D layer, but because we're working on a 3D environment, we're also going to convert this to a 3D layer. And looking inside those properties, this is exactly the same properties as of a 3D layer. All right, now, in this case, let me go ahead and bring the current time indicator to the very beginning. I'm going to animate the position property and the orientation. So I will click on the position stopwatch to create the first keyframe, and then I will click on the stopwatch on the orientation to create the second keyframe. For the position, let me go ahead and change the properties for all the X, Y, and Z. So for example, for the X, I'm just going to push this on the side a bit. All right, say somewhere around here. For the Y, I'm going to push this up. This might be a little bit out of the way here. And for the Z, I'm going to push this back into space. All right, say somewhere around here. All right, so that is the first on the position. Let's go ahead and work on the orientation. I'm gonna change the orientation to, let's say, 36 degrees, but I will do this for all the same values here for the Y as well. 36 and 36. All right. So now I'm going to move the current time indicator to, let's say, 4 seconds. All right, right here. And then I'm going to actually reset the null object by clicking on the reset button right here. There you go. And I will get this, which is correct for now. So the animation, if I was to scrub the current time indicator, it would be something like that. All right. On this keyframe specifically, let's go ahead and press the letter K on the keyboard to make sure that we go to the next visible keyframe. On the Z, I want to have this. Let's say I'm going to zoom in quite a bit. I'm just zooming in a bit, somewhere around here. All right. So when we scrub the current time indicator, we'll get something like this. All right, perfect. Now I'm going to scrub the current time indicator to 5 seconds. And right here, I'm going to add another keyframe only on the position. Scrub the current time indicator around here. And then add another keyframe. And then do the same, let's say around here, and add another keyframe. Now I'm going to go back to 2 visible keyframes, which means I'm going to use the letter J on the keyboard. And this keyframe right now has a linear interpolation. So I'm going to right click and change this to a toggle hold keyframe, which means when the time reaches to 5 seconds, it's going to hold for 1 second, and then it's going to do something. It's going to animate again. So I'm going to press the letter K on the keyboard to go to the next visible keyframe. And for this one on the Z, let's go and zoom out here quite a bit to be able to see the rest of the motif. Say something around here. That's not bad. I just want to change the interpolation from linear to easy is. So I'm going to do this inside the graph editor. Here's the selected keyframe. Just going to change this to easy is. And then I would just double click on this keyframe. And inside the keyframe velocity, I'm going to change the influence to, let's say, 75% or so. And then click OK. And then exit the graph editor. Let's do a quick scrub the current indicator. And we're going to have something along those lines, you see? And this is going to actually animate really nice here. See, looking inside the graph editor and looking at this motion here is going to peak and then it's going to slowly decelerate. And that's why we did this with the keyframe velocity. All right. So this is the final animation. And all I'm going to do is just render this out to be able to see the final result. So after rendering out the animation, let's go ahead and press the spacebar and look at the final result. As you can see, things look great. Everything looks pretty crisp. And of course, there's a lot you can do with the camera movement, but this is just an idea here. All right, so I'm going to move the current time indicator to, let's say, the 8 seconds here. And I'm going to press the letter N on the keyboard to set the end of the work area to the current time. I will right click and trim composition to work area. All right, so this is the whole length of the animation. Another thing you can do is before you render this out, you can go back to the render options and move the slider all the way to the extreme if you want to have a very, very crisp animation.